Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to deal with the war between the dragon and Michael. That's what we are going to deal. Our study is based on the voice of Archangel, and in the First Thessalonians chapter 4:16, we already established that Michael is the one who is like God, the chief messenger of the Lord, was worshipped by Joshua, was worshipped by Abraham, because he told Abraham, "You have not withheld your son from me." So this angel identified himself as Elohim. Why did Paul so it's necessary to include this archangel? Is this referring to the archangel? What did the church in the time of Thessalonian needed to understand by this terminology? Paul was comforting them with the news of the soon coming of their Messiah, deliverance from the tribulation, and also that Israel will be punished when the Lord himself, in the identity of Michael, that is with the voice of the archangel, the captain of the Lord's army, the Lord's hosts, will descend from heaven with a shout to fight on their behalf in their time, not 1,000 years later. Now in Revelation chapter 12, Revelation chapter 12 depicted the war between the dragon and Michael. And we are going to read in Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 to 13. We are going to look at the most part of the book of Revelation was presented to me in different ways. And religious teaching that Satan and God, they used to say that Satan and God had a literal war in heaven, which resulted in Satan and his angel being cast out into the earth. This war was presented as happening before the creation of man, and Satan was cast out, and he came down into the Garden of Eden at the creation. But a careful study of a careful understanding of the book of Revelation, and especially chapter 12, shows that this war occurred shortly after Jesus' resurrection. This war, according to the book of Revelation, never happened into Genesis time, but it happened after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That when the war was to be fought. We are going to read from Revelation chapter 12, verse 5 to 13. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where he has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angel fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angel fought, but they had not prevailed, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceived the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and these angels and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now salvation and strength and kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, all heavens, and you who dwell in them, who to the inhabitant of earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he He knows that he has a short time. Now the dragon, now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. We from reading Revelation chapter 5 to 13. So by examining what we read, we saw here in Revelation chapter 12 verse 5, where he said, she bore a male child. The woman bore a male child who was to rule all the nation with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and his throne. Her child was caught up to God and his throne. She, meaning the woman who John saw in the vision, brought forth a male child. This woman was not Mary only. This woman was the New Jerusalem. She brought forth a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. This is a reference to Jesus Christ. This is a reference to the Son of God, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. This is talking about Jesus' being enthroned and receiving the kingdom to rule. That is the ascension. You see, that's why we sing about this war. We need to understand what is being spoken. This is the child in Revelation chapter 5. We saw Jesus being enthroned, receiving his kingdom. And when was Jesus receiving his kingdom? At his ascension. And verse 6 it says, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. If you try to see, the woman fled into the wilderness, where she was prepared a place of God, and they will feed her there 1,060 days. The point I want to make here is that look at the time setting, the time context of her child was caught up to God and his throne. Here we have the ascension and the enthronement of Christ, and after that there was a war in heaven. So this war didn't happen before the ascension of Jesus Christ. It's after the ascension of Jesus Christ, then there was a war. So this war occurred after the ascension of Christ, not like the way they taught us into Revelation before the creation of man. You see, now it says Michael and as we understand, the chief messenger of the Lord, who is like God, that's Michael, as we saw the identity of Michael, the captain of Lord's hosts. Michael and his angel fought against the dragon. We already know the Michael and his angel. We dealt it with in last session. So the captain of the Lord's host, Michael, and his angel fought against the dragon and his angel, because the dragon also has his own angel or messenger, and Michael also has messenger or angel, right? Remember, the context of the book of Revelation, it's sound theology to believe that in the domain in God's domain, there could be a rebellion or a war or like anything else, or could all this be talking about symbolic way? Is it speaking that in the domain, literally in the domain of God, there was a war? Or was it in a symbolic way to express something? I believe this is a symbolic way. Could it be a sign and symbol of what was happening at the time the vision and revelation was given? We should remember the counsel of the guidance that was given in the first chapter of the book of Revelation, which say that all the events of the book of Revelation were already happening in their time of John, or were about to shortly come to pass or to happen. And this is the time, this is the thing that we should stick on, that we should depend on. If we are obedient to the counsel given by God through his son Jesus, through the angel, through his spirit, because we are clearly instructed that the events of the revelation were not things that will happen thousands and thousands of years after. These things were about to happen, were soon to happen. You see, you may not understand what I'm talking about, but that is the context. Let's read in Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 to 3. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. Blessed is he who read and who understand the word of this prophecy, and keep those things that are written in it, for the time is near. It's shortly to happen. So now, shortly is not measured, or near is not measured from the first century when we are reading it, because the vision was given in was not given in the 21st century. To understand the now or near, we need to go back to the time of the vision was given. The vision was given in the time of John. So the things were to shortly come to pass from the time of John. The time was not at hand. The time was not at hand from the time you are reading. The time was not at hand now. The time was at hand then, that time. The time was not at hand now as you are reading. So, as we are reading it, the time was not at hand from the time you are reading it in the 21st century today. It was at hand in John's time. So, the war in heaven, as we saw, happened after Jesus Christ ascended. And the ascension is 30 AD after Jesus ascended, before Pentecost. That the war happened after Pentecost. And after he ascended and after he was enthroned. And that was 2,000 years ago. That was in the time of John. That was in the time of the apostle, the early church. That it was at hand at that time. So we have to remember the time context of Revelation, just like we have to remember the time context of the Thessalonians. The Thessalonians, they were under persecution. They were expecting something to happen, going to happen in their lifetime. The book of Revelation had to have relevance to these people. If not to these people, if not, it's nonsense sending it to them. If this book has no meaning to them, there is no need it to be sent to them. So let us think about what happened in the time period. In that time period, there was the transition. In this time, in the first century, is the time of transition from the old covenant, from the old world to the new covenant, or to the new world. That was happening. That was Revelation is revealing. They are coming from the old to the new. There was a transition happening from the old to the new. That was happening during the time. There was the transition from the old to the new. From the transition from the transition from the reign of death to the reign of life. From the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to the tree of life. There was a transfer of the kingdom of God from Moses to Christ. If we go into the Gospel of John, the time had come for the kingdom of that old system to be charged. When we read about the Lord descending from heaven, we have already seen from the time context, he was going to descend from heaven in the time of the Thessalonian. When we read about Michael the archangel, the war with the dragon, that war was going on shortly after the ascension of Christ into heaven. So all of these things were going on in the time of the Thessalonian, because they were in the time of transition, where they're transiting from the old to the new. You see, Jesus spoke. Remember, Jesus spoke. Was speaking this 2,000 years ago. He went to the cross, and he was speaking about what will happen after he ascended. And he said in John chapter 12, verse 31 to 33, now is the kingdom of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out. So when people, they're reading this world, they're thinking they're talking the world today. No, their world. They're all covenant world. You see, that's the ruler that was ruling, of the free system that was ruling, was about to be cast out, so that the new system can be installed. And that new system will come with Jesus Christ. And I, if I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. You see, that's after his death. This did he say, signifying by what death he will die. You see, as we read, when John said the judgment of this world, he didn't mean when you are reading it today. No, he meant it in his time, his generation of the Israel to whom he had come. In the generation of the apostle, in the generation of the Thessalonian, that was the now. At that time was the judgment of this world, meaning the present world that they were living in, the cosmos they were living in. You see, that they were in the world, they were in the old world, they were under Moses. They were under the reign of death. They were under the ministry of condemnation. They were under the ministry of death. They were under the tree of knowledge of good and evil. All of that. So he says, now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out, meaning the authority of that world was going to be removed. Why? Because it was going to be replaced with the new authority, which was Christ and your people. And it had to be judged. So according to what Jesus just said in the Gospel of John, the judgment of that system will which I will call the system of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because that is when it started. That system of works, that system of tree of knowledge of good and evil had the authority over that world. The world that Israel was in the time of of judgment had come. The time of the judgment of that system, of that world had come. For that system and the authority that system had was going to be taken away. It was going to be removed. And the authority was going to be given to Christ. So that's what Jesus was saying. Judging this world and implementing the new world. I, Jesus, I'm going to be the ruler. Because that system had its own angels. Those angels will be cast out. They will be dashed out. So the system of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was going to be replaced by the way of Christ, which is the tree of life. And the authority was going to be bestowed to Christ. For this to happen, the old system had to be stripped of its authority. So all the angels of that authority were supposed to be under Christ. As we read in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 22, it says, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angel and authority and power, having been made subject to him. You see, Christ being at the right hand of God symbolizes the power, the place of power, the place of authority. Angels and authority and power had been made or were being made subject to Christ. So they were being made to Christ. So the authority that the old system had was removed, or was being removed during the transition time, because there was a transition from one system to another system. You see, the authority that the old system had, and all those who had authority in that system, no longer had the authority in the new system. They were now placed on Christ. And we have to remember the context in which this thing was happening. The old system was under the rabbis and the scribe and the Pharisees and the chief priests and the elders. These were the angels. These were the angels of that system who were fighting the angels of God. You can see the war? The messengers of heaven and the authority of the old system. But the new system was Christ and the apostle. In the other way, Michael and his angel. Christ and his apostle means Jesus is Michael, and the angel are the apostles. You can see the war? And I think now you can see when was this war happening. All right. Yeah. The messenger of heaven and the authority of the old system. But when the new system was Christ and the apostle, or Michael and the angel. So now, the old system with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil amplified under Moses. It started there. Under Moses was amplified. Was under Moses and his angel. That system which came from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, who was the first to recommend that system. The first to recommend that system of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, according to the narrative, is towards the serpent. That is why Revelation links the dragon, the serpent, and the evil. It said the dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. Deceive the whole world is not now. That world that was under the old covenant, that is the world that was deceived, that was being spoken here in Revelation chapter 12. I think now you're understanding, right? You see, you remember when did the serpent say to Adam, if you eat of this tree, you will be like God. So that implies you will have to do something to be like God. That is the system now. You have to do something. That's how it started. That's how this world started and was amplified into Moses. That is the one that was needed to end. You understand? The serpent is the one who introduced the system. He said, if he said to Adam, if you eat of this tree, you will be like God. So that implied you will have to do something to be like God. Now, how did God create animal? In what status? God created Adam in what status? God created Adam and Eve. They were created in the image and the likeness of God. They were already created in the image and the likeness of God. They didn't want to do anything. So they were already like God. All they need to do was to believe and receive it. They were only to receive, not to do something to become. You see, they were only to receive it and believe it. That was the tree of knowledge of good and the tree of life. The tree of the life is receiving, believing, and you receive it. You do not need to do anything. God has already made you. It's for you to receive. It's for you to believe it. So now the serpent came. No. You have to do something to become. That is the system of the works. The system of works. That is the system of the serpent. That is the system of serpent that was introduced in the Garden of Eden. You understand? So that's why Paul is linking. That's why Paul is linking the dragon, the serpent, and Satan. He's telling them now. Because if you try to see, so many people, they think that the war was happening in heaven, and then Satan was cast up on the earth before the creation of man, and then he was sent into the garden. All right, no, it's after there was a law. After when there was a law, now comes the serpent. Now comes the serpent when God says he has already made Adam and Eve in his image. Now comes the serpent to tell them, no, you need to do something. That was the fall. That was the system that was introduced by Satan via Adam. And that system was amplified from that time on until the Old Covenant. That's why if we try to see the Old Covenant, is do to become. So it needed to end. That world needed to end. And will end with the introduction of Jesus, who is the tree of life. Where now we are receiving by believing, and we are already made. We are agreeing to what God agrees already. You don't need to do something to become. He has done it. You have to receive. That is the system. That is the world. That's Jesus was saying, I am here to judge that system, that world. And that world has its angels. If you try to read the rabbis, if you break the law, if you don't do this, they tell you are under punishment. You understand? That is a system that was already introduced that Jesus came to break. Yeah. So I think we are going to continue these developments in the next session. Yeah. I thank you. Bye-bye.